Welcome back! This is part 2 of my series where I go through each mech in this amazing mech tabletop game, Lancer, and give one fun lore fact about each one. If for whatever reason this is the first video in this little series you found, you could stick around. I mean, watch this one first if you really want to. I'm not your dad, I can't tell you what to do. And to be honest, the only thing you're missing out on is just which companies I cover, because the only difference is like today I'm going to be talking about Horus and Harrison Armory, rather than ISPN North Star and Smith Shimano. That's it. Nothing else really. This video was absolutely wild and harder to research for weird reasons that I'll get into and explain very soon. So if you like this video, consider subscribing or something, I guess. I don't know. And thank you to my channel members for making all these videos possible, and a special shout out to Christian Voorhees for subscribing at the highest level. This level of support truly helps the channel, so it's greatly appreciated. There is one important thing I need to get into when it comes to Horus and the Horus line of mechs. It is very important to keep in mind that unlike the other companies, Horus isn't that, and Horus mechs don't really have a solid form or shape or classification type, really. Outside forces have given them all classification terms, which are all the names that we have in the game. Every picture I'm going to show you is basically one documented example of a mech that is in a specific classification, and the classification is just a mech that operates in a similar power set, basically. One of the first things you'll learn about the Balor is that its form isn't really a form, as it's really just billions of nanobots, all linked together in one big hive mind, which means it can both take whatever shape it wants, and fighting it is really weird, as it's quoted as being like shooting angry water. But wait, it gets worse. The first encounter with the Balor was with an entity known as the Maw, which led a bunch of prototype Balor. In this battle, the Maw and his followers died, but the Swarm escaped containment, which did include the bodies of those prototype Balor pilots, which means every subsequent Balor has fragments of those pilots' minds and consciousness mixed in there somewhere, lost in the nanobot hive mind. The Goblin is the first identified Horus mech frame, and the Goblin is mostly used by techies and hacker types, and it's also the best for leading electronic warfare due to its size, speed, and just general ability set. Fun fact I found has to do with its specific core system, the Instinct Rig, which allows for the Goblin to attach itself to other mechs to assist with hacking stuff like electronic defense and all of that. Now, helpfully noted in the README files, nicely nested in the code base of the Goblin, it states that you need to cycle your Goblin's power cores on a monthly basis, because the system automatically does hacking things for you. So if you don't do this, your Goblin could spontaneously gain self-awareness. Despite this, or I think more honestly, due to this, those pilots have not read any of the README files. The NHP you get in the Gorgon license is proper weird, and by that I mean it's proper Horus. The Skylab class NHP, obviously named after the Greek sea monster, and I mean, everything in the Horus line is named after monsters, and, you know, the Gorgon is very Greek monster. Proper Horus in the fact that nobody knows where it came from, and once people started testing it, it cascaded in literally a couple minutes, only becoming fragmented to a reasonable level once Union researchers just shot it with whatever guns they had on hand. I like the very technical way that they describe doing this. And a very important mention is the text right at the end there, which says, quote, "There, a little history, a little background, a little knowledge of where this little one came from. Treat it with kindness and it will love you as a loyal dog does its master." Who wrote it? It's uncertain. I have my theories, which I will get to down the line because there are mechs that cover this more intently. And on CompCon it has a very cool effect, which leads into this fact. Oh, and also, one small little mention. Do not look directly into the aperture. The Hydra is a very interesting mech, to say the least. It's very cool. The entire vibe of just being a convergence of drones instead of one solid body. And Hydra was first encountered right after the Deimos event, which is where the entity known as Ra first emerged. I am not going to break down the entire story of Ra and the Deimos event. It is a really cool story though. If you want a great lore summary, go watch this specific video. I'm actually a big fan of Zach Tech's like Lancer videos. He is probably one of the best Lancer lore guys out there. He's fantastic. Go give him a watch. But one of the effects of Ra was all the robots, the drones, and just automatons of any kind on Mars all acted autonomously, which then, in the case of drones, they started to clump together in a swarm almost like birds, until eventually they formed like an actual mind, to where they could be classified and were classified by researchers as an NHP, the Orochi NHP. And now this one is a freebie because of my own personal special interests. So Hydra gets compared a lot to Monsoon from Metal Gear Rising, which is fair, you know, a character that can freely separate himself, much like Hydra can. I mean, just look at them. Now, I thought this was just a fun surface level thing until I read the Puppet Master license, which says, and I quote, "Once inside a network, the Puppet Master spreads ontological kill memes like wildfire through enemy swarms. Memes, the DNA of the soul." I'll be real, Manticore is really simple. This is kind of what I was talking about when I was saying that this is getting difficult to research in some ways, because I went in trying to answer some key questions. First question I had, I wonder if there's anything lore-wise answering. Why is there a mech with a key design feature centering around killing yourself? Then I quickly realized, oh yeah, wait, this is Horus, of course there's not. And then the second question, well, it's obviously religious. I wonder if it has any ties to the adherents of Ra, the people who worship Ra in secret, and I wonder what they actually believe in, if there's ever been any details in some of the later books. No, it's kind of the thing I said in part 1, where Lancer has a lot of really cool flavor and is detailed just enough that you can kind of work with like the vibes of it, but I don't think there's too much that it's not as detailed as the normal sci-fi stuff that I'm as well versed in, things like 40k. So other than that, every single piece of the flavor text is just some form of like little fake Bible verse, which means I have one real piece of lore to actually work through to like give a fun fact. And you know what? There is a fun fact in here. It's the fact that Union's reaction to the Manticore classification is immediate panic, which I think is a very fair reaction. And again, I also like in the compendium the absolute technical language they have of freaking the fuck out over this thing's existence. Now, while the Goblin is the first discovered Horus frame, the Minotaur was the first classification discovered. Specifically, what I mean by that is anything that has the rough power sets of Minotaur is classified as a Minotaur, but it doesn't have to look anything like this. And much like the Manticore, it's another one where the only non-quote flavor text is right in the compendium. I do love the Manticore lore though, and I love reading through it. It is fantastic. I highly recommend it. This is the one where I can get into that bit I mentioned about Gorgon, who wrote all of this kind of glitchy text, where I believe it's also pretty heavily supported that this is written by Ra or something writing with the authority of Ra, which honestly, if any mech would be writing with that level of authority, I think it's fair to go with this one, to be honest. I would hope the mech repping the Eldritch Math God would opt to instead shove all of its internal parts into a pocket dimension rather than just have it, you know, sit inside a big metal tube. Sadly, there isn't really much lore for the Calendula, except for the fact that despite it's nearly identical to the Minotaur, it's expected it's a variant frame of the Minotaur, though there is evidence that it is a derision found from the Karakan trade baronies, though it was also possibly made completely separately before Union contact was made in the first place, which makes no sense, like at all. Like, how is that possible? It is a one-to-one derision. Also, it has the absolute rawest core system name ever. Execration of the names of the unworthy dead. The Pegasus is another mech that has ties with the Onic people and the Firmament. In part 1, I went over this concept when talking about the Morning Cloak, where this is blink space and most likely the ability to physically alter causality itself, and special means only really known and usable by the On, which allows for the special weapon of the Pegasus, the Shopti Omnigun, to just ignore the laws of physics. Like, completely. The core theme of the Kobold is civilian mining mechs. While this entire series I've mentioned the Karakid trade baronies, the Kobold is a mech frame that was made and distributed by a revolutionary cell to fight against Baronic rule. So, directly fighting against it instead of being distributed directly for the trade baronies. The coolest part of this is the Kobold's code is made in a way to circumvent printers entirely. So instead, it is injected into civilian equipment, which is then taken over and turned into the Kobold to be used in the rebellion. This also allows for the Kobold frame to be pushed beyond normal mech limit, since normally standard issue printers have these little things known as safety features, which are pre-installed into everything they make. So the Kobolds don't have these, and many pilots learn this the hard way when they push the Kobolds a little too far. So where do I even begin on the Lich? In the compendium, they say the file date of its creation is 15,005U, and the current year in the setting is 5016U, so it's very clear this mech is fucky with time. Then there are the audio logs, so this is another mech that does not have full-on lore flavor text, it is more dialogue text. So I guess, yes, this can serve as a fun fact. If I read through all of the Lich's flavor text, here are the main 5 important details we can glean from the Lich. Drink deep and descend. The water is warm and well. Where does it go? Where did I go? Drink deep and descend, which personally I think it speaks for itself. And now, thankfully, we can return back to the realms of normal, workable physics with Harrison Armory and the Barbarosa. Which, speaking of, the Barbarosa is a nice simple mech standing at 13 meters tall and wielding a giant gravity gun Apocalypse Rail. So the Apocalypse Rail is normally built for ship-based combat because it's just so big that they can slap on a weapon built for starship cruisers. And also it is a gravity cannon because in the Lancer world, they could make gravity tech, but in reality, why would you waste your money on that? Instead, you have the Harrison Armory methodology of what are the military used for it? That's the smarter question to ask. The Genghis was first designed in the giant war that saw the overthrow of the Second Committee. The fun fact, I say that with a lot of hesitancy, is that this version you see here is the redesign. The Genghis here is the Mark II, because the Mark I was worse morally speaking. Not effectively, morally. I joke often that Harrison Armory is also just called War Crimes Incorporated, but the Genghis is all about using a big-ass flamethrower, and they mention they had to specifically redesign it to be more in line with the 3 utopian pillars of union which you see on screen right now. Yeah, and speaking of its variant frame, the World Killer Genghis, this is the Mark I variant, noted as it's being more crude, less refined, and its power set is more indiscriminate torching of literally everything in its vicinity. I did mean it when I said gravity tech is literally only used for its military application. The Iskander is literally just that. And I gotta be real, okay, so the Horus stuff was difficult to find some fun facts because literally a lot of the flavor text is just esoteric, weird bullshit in quotes. Some of the Harrison Armory stuff, especially the core book Harrison Armory stuff, is really hard to find fun facts because it's just detailing weapons or it's a big robot holding a gun. So there's just not a lot of lore. I'm sorry, the Iskander is good at getting rid of mines, making more mines, and it's a mobile command unit. There's not a lot to talk about here, and I struggle because I didn't want to just give the gameplay details as a fun fact, but there's not a lot to work with. It has a gravity gun, but I was really sad to learn it's not like the Half-Life one, which is sad. The Napoleon is a mech that works with the idea of quantum mechanics and blink space manipulation, and as such has sorts of really weird and dubious ethical ways of doing this. There's one particular one that I like. So there is the the phase ready weapon mod, which turns your bullets into shots that operate with the rules of quantum superposition, which is the idea that things can exist in multiple positions at once. So say for example, you shoot your gun. Now your bullet exists in multiple states, and the main state it exists in is right at the position of where you shot it, existing right outside your gun, and existing right in front of your target. So you can shoot through things like cover and stuff, which means you're way, way more likely to hit your target. And also the part that's really interesting about this is, man, This feels like some Pegasus shit. This doesn't even feel like Harrison Armory, which I kind of fuck with. The Saladin is a beloved frame, both in lore and out of game. Now, there's a big meme about the Saladin, which I'm really happy to see fully supported in the flavor text of the mech, not just like out of game. But basically, the Saladin is just so good at its defensive role, it's built a really positive reputation. It's taken part in really good missions in human rights liberations, refugee escort jobs, and the list goes on and on and on. It's specifically requisitioned by Union from Harrison Armory for these specific jobs, especially for like the really nice parts of Union and the really nice teams of Union and the parts of Union that specifically butt heads with Harrison Armory for very, very obvious reasons, like the Human Rights Board of Union. Seeing a Saladin on the battlefield is a massive morale boost. So far that Saladin pilots in many different systems often find that at the end of the night, in certain bars, their bar tabs just end up being 0 for some reason. And as such, it has gotten the nickname of Big Sal. So yeah, thanks Big Sal. Remember what I said about the Iskander? Yeah, the Sherman is just a big robot with a gun. It's not that crazy. I wouldn't imagine it would be, because the Sherman is just like the most common mech next to the GMS Everest, which is like, you know, the Walmart mech. The only other fact I could give is the NHP Asura, which is the NHP you get, used to be a lot more unhinged and kind of funny, and the fact that they built it with the Horus Puppet Master code from the Hydra, and that's not a great idea, my personal opinion. I just personally wouldn't do that. But it used to operate with no concern for pilot safety, and it would go so fast it would just kill Sherman pilots with sheer G-force in the mech. It doesn't do that anymore though. The Tokugawa is one of the newer frames on the market, is yet another frame where, yeah, there's not a lot to work with. Every license is just talking about how the mech is about pushing it to the limit. The pilots are daredevils who often kill themselves and return to their hangar as just a ball of slag. Or the reactors are made in a way that all the excess heat is pushed toward those gauntlet blades and used as weapons. The Enkidu is more interesting, in my opinion, as it is the same concept, just pushed a little further, as the neural interface the pilots interact with is dangerous, meaning those pilots that stayed in the program had to be kept in line with a strong cocktail of drugs, neural implants, and suppressants. Though much like the Genghis, I do have to let you know, this is the original version of the Tokugawa. Once Union came along, they fixed this frame. Though it also seems like they were in the works to fix this anyways, because for obvious reasons, this version where they had to like fix their pilots and like drug them the whole time, it just wasn't really working. It doesn't leave them in a good state. It's just not a perfect mech design to turn all of your dudes into just big Eversor assassins. While the Napoleon touches on the idea of messing with blink space as a weapon, that's the entire concept of the Sun Z. Using the tech taken from the Volderes, all of the flavor text is written in teachings taken from them, and it's raw as fuck. Okay, I think my two absolute favorite quotes from it are the lines, "You made the door, you swung it open, it is not our responsibility to close it," for the warp rifle, and the text from the Real Space Breach, a hack that you use to literally tear a breach in space to absorb an attack and redirect it at someone else. It says, "They say it is difficult to see in this place. We say you are correct. It is because this place does not want you here." And yeah, that is, so far, every single mech in Lancer. So, yeah. If you like this, like, comment, subscribe, join my membership, do that stuff, and I'll be back soon with, 40k and vampire stuff. See ya.